Good day, grade 12s, and welcome to today's English home language lesson. My name is Bosh Suchit, and we are dealing with English home language, as I said to you. And particular focus today is your paper one that you're going to be writing on the 28th. That's already 2 days away from now, where you'll be sitting for that paper. I did look at this paper previously in the past weeks. However, today we're going to be looking at your comprehension skills as well as your summary skills that you need to work with in this paper. So if you take these two questions, grade 12s, you will notice that it's 30 plus 20, plus 10, which gives you how many marks? 40 out of 70. So make sure that you go back and revise these sections very well so that you are ready for this paper on the 28th of this month. All right, so let's get into the lesson quite quickly, grade 12s, because you will note that I'm sure the nerves are all really, fluttering right now and you're stressed out a bit on what you need to do. So you've also written a week of exams thus far, or 2 or 3 days of exams thus far, and you know that it is vital that your time management is there and the fact that you have your nerves in check when you're sitting in an exam room. Now, if you have gone through the process as you have thus far, you will also note, grade 12s, that we give you that 10-minute reading time. And that's where it becomes very important that you sit during those 10 minutes and read the paper. Thrash out everything in terms of what it's asking you and sort of almost get a gauge of what the passages are dealing with in the comprehension and the summary. But before I get into all the nitty-gritty details about these first two questions, I want to tell you about that 40% strategy. If you are that candidate that is not really performing to the best of your ability and you're struggling to get the marks to pass English home language, then in this paper, for paper one, you can at least attempt to get the 40 or the 45%, okay? Now, this is just the minimum. So, grade 12s, if you start targeting in question one, let's say, for example, you go between 10 to 12. All right, that will give you at least 12 marks out of 70, which already is a good footing if you're working towards that 28 or 30 out of 70. Okay, so please look at the hints I'm going to give you today and focus on that as well in preparation. All right, in the summary, 10 marks on average, you can get at least between 6 and 7 out of 10, if nothing else. Okay, and I'm going to show you also how to get that marks for question 2. In terms of cartoon analysis and advertisements, I did cover this with you last week as well. So hopefully you would go back and look at the lessons we've done thus far, as well as work that your teachers have done with you in preparation for this exams. Okay, look at the techniques that you required to know for the cartoons and the advertisements. All right, and then we're looking at the question 5, which is then your editing section, where we're saying to you that you can at least get 2 marks. But 2 out of 10 grade 10s, grade 12s are not what we want of you. We want you to at least get 5 out of 10, okay? And it's possible if you just go over the concepts that I'm going to show you as well in the last slide or two of this presentation. All right, so 40% definitely possible or an average for you that you can get in this paper if you go back and look at everything we have done thus far in this year and the build up obviously to your final exams. Remember, 70 marks, 2 hours to answer this paper. Now, previously, grade 12s, when the other batch of grade 12s wrote in the last year or two, we've seen common trends or errors that are coming through, okay? There's always things that we can learn from the past and we can almost avoid in the present or in the future to come, okay? And you have that opportunity right now. So when you get the comprehension, please don't fall into that category where you cannot get the gist of the passage. So you read the passage and you work through kind of trying to get the gist, the summary of what this text is talking about, and then link that to the words, the question words that are given to you. Now, sometimes the question words can be tricky because remember, they may not they may seem very easy in terms of if we say identify or provide, for example, but they could be requiring a little bit more from you. So you got to go back, look at what those question verbs are asking of you, and then the techniques that were given to you to handle those question words. Okay. So, firstly, please make sure you get that gist or the crux or the summary of what that text is talking about. There was also this inability to formulate answers that made sense. So when you're reading something, remember, you are going to try and make sense of it. And then you're going to be able to put it into your own words. Now you've had a wealth of life before this to date, and you've seen things, you have read things over your lifetime, and you are able to get an idea of what those things are saying. So we hope in grade 12s that you can now, after decoding that message that's given to you, you are able to put it into your own words for simpler or easier understanding. Okay, so make sure whatever's there, you can sort of put it into your own words. And if you can't, then do the clever kind of quoting, okay, which would be acceptable in the paper. Don't quote chunks, as I will speak to you a bit further about that. All right. There was also an issue where the grade 12s previously, they could not write answers that required what we're looking for, the critical understanding or the thinking about things. All right. So when you are reading a text, remember there's a message coming through, right? That author or that writer or that journalist, whoever it is, wants to give you that message. And they want to essentially make an impact on you as a person. So your thinking should be affected by it. Your levels of emotions should be affected by it. I mean, you can't just read something and say, oh, okay, I'm not affected. It's not going to happen. Whatever you read in life or whatever you come across in life will affect you on various levels. And we're testing that level in your question 4, sorry, your level 4 and level 5, or even level 3 sometimes. We're testing where we can see, okay, you've read something. Can you formulate a judgment? Can you give us a reason why you are having that judgment or a reason why you're feeling that way about the topic? Okay. And then the impact from there is, how is it going to affect you going forward in life, or how is it going to make you do things differently? Okay. Now remember, this is going to be very important because remember, you are going to be tested on current events may be happening in the world thus far. Okay, maybe future plans that may be affected by what's happening. These are where your sort of topics will come from in the English home language. Okay, so make sure that you're keeping up to the current situations in that's happening in South Africa or even around the grade 12 cohort thus far. All right, there's issues that have been obviously affecting you guys over the last 12 months, if not going forward to affect you in the next maybe 6 to 8 months. Okay, so look at the concepts now over the weekend that may be possible topics that could be looked at. So that higher order questioning is a problem, or understanding is a problem. All right. There was also the issue where with the summary, for example, now candidates were taking chunks out of the summary. So remember, you get a piece of work and you need to put it into a summary form or into your own words to a word count of about 80 to 90 words usually, isn't it? So what candidates did previously is they just took chunks and just copied it down. Now that obviously didn't show understanding, okay? And they weren't able to also sometimes put them into sentences. So remember, we want to see coherent sentences with all of the necessary aspects that need to be in a sentence to make it a sentence, if that makes sense to you, okay? So punctuation marks, the subjects, the verbs, the objects, all of those things must be in the right places, okay, when you are constructing a summary, for example. Also, candidates had a problem where they gave the point form summary, okay? So we are saying to you, please, grade 12s, do not do that. It's not as the other subjects would be testing you. So with home language, we want you to do a paragraph, a fully fledged paragraph, please, as the requirement for this question. Number of words also becomes a concern when you're summarizing there. Remember, if we say to you use 80 words or 90 words, it's very rare that you can get a full summary done with 50 words, okay, and all the ideas um, put in there. So be aware of that. There's a word count for a reason. We're saying there's so many facts there that we can get you to write till 80 or 90 words. So don't just go and put down, a very skeletal piece of work and expect to be marked according to that. Okay, so be careful that you also don't exceed it by a huge amount of words. Now, when we're looking at the comprehension, remember I said to you it's 30 marks, all right? And it's a huge chunk of the paper. So you need to obviously be clever in this regard, okay? Come up with things that, or ways to win this, in other words, to have success with this comprehension. So the first 15 minutes should be spent on reading the text. Now, remember, you got 10 minutes reading time where you've just got a general checking of the paper, you're scanning, you're trying to make sense of what questions you more or less be comfortable with, okay? So that 10 minutes, if you're going to use it as a disciplined 10 minutes, it already gives you a bit of a boost with the time in this paper, all right? Plus 15 minutes is when you're going to now reread the passage, make sense of what it's saying, highlight the topic, okay? That's important. So you take your highlights, and remember the question paper is yours. You can make notes on that, okay? So just highlight the topic because that is an idea of what the text is all about. Okay, we don't just put a topic that's totally random. It is in relation to the content of the passage. And then look at the topic sentence then of each of the paragraphs thereafter, because that's the main idea of that paragraph that is going to then be expanded on in the remaining lines of the paragraphs. Okay, then the next 45 minutes, grade 12s, you need to then spend time answering the questions on the comprehension. So it's 45 minutes to answer the questions. So by the time that 15 minutes and that 10 minutes is gone past, you should already be having an idea of answers that you could possibly put for the questions that have been asked. Okay, so spend that 45 minutes. Give yourself that time that is required to answer this question. There's no need to rush the comprehension, all right? Because if you're going to rush the comprehension just to get away from it and then get into the other sections, you may not answer the other sections very well and you lose the marks, all right? Or the other way around is you rush through or you take too long with the comprehension and then you don't spend enough time on the rest of the paper. So when you're reading your instructions, there will be a guideline given to you on how many minutes to spend on each question. Please, I'm appealing to you, grade 12s. Your friends in the exam room at this point are not important. If friend A has finished this paper in 25 minutes and wants to leave, then let that person go and do whatever they want to do. It's not you. So you have 2 hours. Use the 2 hours thoroughly, please. Don't waste the time. Don't write for 25 or 30 minutes and then put your head down on the table and say, I'm finished with the exam paper. That's not what you have to do in this paper. You gotta take every single paper in your home language very seriously. Now, you would have had a taste of paper 3 already that you wrote last week, and you can sort of see that there are ways to do well in this subject, okay? And hopefully you found that paper was nice. Now, here we're testing your concepts, your understanding. Can you work with the intricate parts of the home language, okay? And that's where we are working here with the comprehension and the summary paper. So spend the time as you should for each of the questions as well as the sections that you are working with. Now, as you get through from question 1.1 all the way to maybe 1.11, if it's the last question, or 1.12, depending on how the paper is going to play out, the last question of the comprehension, that is the comprehension question where we are looking at your understanding of comparing text A with text B. Now, it could either be the whole of text A to text B, or part of text A and text B being referred to. Okay, a link must be found. So please, grade 12s, again, take 6 minutes or so here, not more than 6 minutes, okay, to formulate a nice answer. Now, don't write the draft for 6 minutes of the answer. No, I mean, put the effort to get that 6 minutes thoroughly used for answering the question. So, again, focus on that comparison question at the end. Sometimes we just browse through it and say, ah, you know what, I'll just put this and put that and whatever, and hopefully I get marks out of it. But there is a technique to answer it, okay? And go back and look at that technique. Compare text A to the part that is asked of in text B, for example, or text A's part that we're asking you to look at. But we will go through that as well just now. Read through the passage quickly. In other words, scanning through it. The title of the passage will then give you a clue, as I said, of what the passage is all about. Read the comprehension questions, please, grade 12s. Take the time, read it, understand it. Make sure when you're doing this, you're keeping the main idea of the passage in your mind as you're browsing through. Please identify the purpose of the text. In other words, every writer or speaker will have a purpose for that particular text. So in this paper one, there is a purpose as to why this writer wrote this article. Okay, so look for that purpose. Break the heading down. Look at the source. Where is this particular text coming from? And the style in which this writer has written. Okay, look at it. Is it a very formal piece of work or an informal piece of work? Is there a use of a lot of jargon, perhaps? These are concepts you should be looking at. Is the terminology used in this text relevant to a learner at grade 12 level? That kind of understanding or thinking should also come through when you are reading. Read the instructions carefully. Focus on the keywords as I've mentioned here in the comprehension passage. Again, take the highlighter, highlight those important words that you are finding in each of the paragraphs. Read the questions and decide which level is this question testing. Is it testing my ability to just recall information? Does it want me to give my opinion? When I give my opinion, can I justify my opinion as to why I am saying what I'm saying, okay? Now, remember, your opinion as well, grade 12s, cannot be so far off what the text is saying. So try and take your general broad ideas of what this text is teaching you about and streamline it to what we are trying to get you to understand, the gist of the piece of work, okay? So decide which level it is on and then pitch your answers at that level. With the level 1 and level 2 questions, in other words, those entry level questions, it's not straightforward. You will not get a question like, for example, identify this in that line. It's too basic for home language, okay? As I say to you. But you will have to say, for example, maybe you'll get a question like, refer to paragraph 1 and maybe look at the main idea of what this particular writer is talking about and offer your viewpoint on that. Okay, so again, looking at your straightforward questions or your answers there, it'll come in from just being your ability to recall the information from the text. Okay, now when it comes to rephrasing of sentences, please look at your life thus far, and hopefully you have read newspapers, you have read blogs on the internet, or you've read pieces that people have written on the internet, maybe a summary of a text, or you've read about a particular issue that's affecting you. Whatever it is, you have to have been doing some kind of reading, okay, in your life. So we're saying here, if you were using the newspapers or you're using relevant grade 12 content, please look at the way in which the sentences are formulated. There will be coherent, full sentences that are in those articles. And then this will allow you to then know when I'm formulating my answers, I need to ensure that all parts of what I want to say comes through clearly in my answers. Okay, so rephrase the sentences that you're finding in the text. Please also use the mark allocation as a guide. So if you're saying 2 marks or 3 marks, okay, that in itself is saying to you, for 2 marks, we want you to have a clear idea and a viewpoint or a substantiation for that viewpoint, okay? 3 marks, we want 2 main ideas or 2 concepts being dealt with thoroughly. And the 3rd mark then would probably link when we're looking at your comment in relation to the 2 concepts we asked you about. So use that that guideline, the mark as a guideline to what we are asking of you. All right. Read through the text again quickly, get that outline of the text to get a general picture. And when you are reading, sometimes you find that maybe it's a situation that you can identify with. Then you'd start to imagine what this writer is talking about. And that's good because then imagination helps you to get more ideas of what could possibly happen or what's happened to bring this particular content to light. Okay, so that helps you to focus on what the meanings of the words or what the text is saying to you when you are reading the text. Okay, so please try and picture things, but again, don't picture things that are far away from the topic. Okay, link it to what this topic is talking about. So when we're looking at the comprehension passage, please, your mark allocation, as I said to you, 2 marks means 1 main idea with a detail. All right, whereas the 3 marks will then be 2 well discussed ideas with some details of one of those 2. Okay, another way to understand that mark allocation, grade 12s, is that you can see it as a combination of 1 mark assignments. So no idea, concept, or fact, remember, is assigned just more than 1 mark, but rather there's a combination of ideas that come across to give us that 1 mark. So you need to be able to give us that argument that we're looking for. So it's not really difficult to formulate. So look at that, okay? Questions when we're dealing with concepts like diction, tone, style, and imagery. Now, this is something you may say, oh, but that's paper 2 knowledge I need to worry about. No, it's not. Because remember, when you're dealing with a passage, there are words being used. There's a choice of words that writer is using. And he's used it for a particular reason. In other words, to get his message across, to get the purpose fully understood, okay, of his text. So the choice of words is the diction that we are talking about. The tone, in other words, it's the attitude that he had when he was writing this particular piece of work, or in terms of the content, what his viewpoint of that content was. So his tone would come across very clearly when you're reading it. All right. His style of writing, again, I mentioned to you as we spoke about previously, look at the way in which this writer is writing. Okay, a lot of jargon maybe. Is it an informal text? Is it a formal text? What kind of audience is it targeting? All those things you should be looking at, okay? And then the imagery here obviously is looking at the figurative aspects, okay? Remember we did talk about previous lessons, denotation and connotation. You're taking the literal meaning of a word, that's your denotation, your dictionary meaning, and then you sort of looking at the connotative, the implied meaning of those words, okay? The figurative aspects need to come through here as well. So these need to be based upon the relevant questions from the resource that we are now talking about, the context of the passage, okay? So you cannot be looking at generic answers and expecting to get full marks, all right? So we're not asking you here, grade 12s, to give us a definition of diction or tone or all of those things. It's not going to give you marks, but we want to see your understanding of those concepts. So your answers need to be looking at what was the intention of the author or the writer when he wrote this piece of work or each of the paragraphs. So please, when we're talking about giving answers here, remember there's lifting and there's clever lifting. Right. So if you're going to take word for word verbatim, meaning comma, apostrophe, full stop, capital letter, everything exactly the same, that is lifting. That's taking an entire chunk, and therefore it's not anything you've done to change the meaning of that. To change that, sorry, that sentence that was there. So if you take that quote that you want to speak about and you change a few words here and there and you put in your own understanding, then it's obviously then part of the answer is coming from the resource. So you have lifted cleverly with your answers, okay? So avoid penalties for lifting chunks verbatim from the text. Don't do that. It doesn't show that you have understood anything in the text. Right. So each question has a question word that I explained to you. Underline this. For example, there'll be explain the following or list or discuss the relevance of this idea that the author is speaking about. And then those will test your various levels of understanding. So the key word, as I mentioned to you in each paragraph, needs to be highlighted. The key idea needs to be also highlighted in each of the paragraphs. Please try and remember when you read a question, where can you refer back to, sorry, can you remember at which paragraph you read that kind of idea? Okay, so always cross-reference from your question to your passage to see where you made notes perhaps, or to gauge your understanding whether it's clear or not. Right. So putting your eyes into search mode, that's very important. Remember, you're looking from the top down to the middle of the text, trying to scan for information. Remembering again the key word and the key idea. Please read the entire sentence to get all the marks. So remember, we write out a question testing certain aspects that we want you um, to familiarize yourself with. So you need to understand that I have to answer all parts of the questions to get all the marks. Okay. There's no use in just saying, okay, I'll get 1 out of 3 and I'm satisfied with that. Yes, it's fine if you're just looking to pass. But if you're looking to master the skill, which is going to help you in your real life after matric, then that is what you're going to focus on in terms of getting that 2 or 3 marks in that question to ensure you get a good mark at the end of this entire paper. Right. So please, some recommendations for you. When you're looking at previous question papers, go through the types of questions that have been asked there. For example, the explanation of the usage of a question in terms of the text, the impact of a single line paragraph. Now, that question I think came out, I believe, maybe about 2 years ago, if I can remember correctly. They asked the function of the single sentence paragraph in the sentence, and you needed to understand why would an author use a single sentence paragraph, okay, and obviously deal with the impact of that. Then the choice of words being used. Why did the author use those particular words as opposed to other words? And you need to work with that. And then also look at the standard comparative summary question, which is either maybe 1.11 or 1.12. Remember, focus. If it says paragraph 9 of text A in relation to text B, that is where you're going to have your answer coming from. So your answer should be based on those 2 sections of the question, of the passages. If they're saying holistically, maybe paragraph 8 and 9 of text A in comparison to the text B, then you've again got 3 aspects or 3 parts to look at. All right. It's never going to be straightforward of just match A and B. It's not that kind of testing. Okay. We're looking at summaries of text A and text B in relation to each other. Okay, there has to be a common kind of thread that might come across depending on how the examiners are setting the paper this year as well. All right, Remember to also maybe focus on generic stylistic devices that you need to look at. Please go over that. Then also the link this to the question. In other words, your stylistic devices, link it to the question in context. Example, the writer's use of a single line paragraph. It is done because he's trying to emphasize his viewpoint or his standpoint on this particular concept. Okay, those are the kind of ideas you can look at when you're talking about the stylistic devices. Look at the validity of the writer's conclusion. Now, we can argue that a text is there and we can say it's relevant or non-relevant or not relevant, sorry. Now we can say that, but we got to justify why it's relevant or not relevant to the reader at large. Okay, so when a text is also written, if you looked at your paper 3, you wrote an essay, you ended that essay in a particular way. Now the question is, was that conclusion a justifiable conclusion to the text? All right, so when the markers are marking, they'll look at that. In the same token with your transactionals that you wrote. Okay, now with the writer's conclusion in the text A that we're dealing with comprehension, you're going to see, based on the content you've read throughout the passage, does the conclusion tie in to the concepts being spoken about during your reading of the entire other 4 or 5 paragraphs? Is there a valid conclusion to this passage or not? With a question, for example, sometimes you'll find a piece will have a question in the first line or 2 of the text. Then ask yourself, why did this author use a question in that particular paragraph? Okay, then the visual component of text B, remember, it is a comprehension set question. It's not linked to visual literacy that you cover in question 3 and 4. So this means we're testing your understanding of concepts about comprehension skills. So it's a content-based question. Okay, so don't be just saying, oh, it's a text B is a cartoon strip and therefore I need to know about cartoons. No, that's not what you're going to be looking at with text B. Right, the conclusion, please link the significant points of the conclusion again to the text and what the points are mentioned about in the text. Consider the final appeal may be made by the writer in the conclusion. Remember, if an author is having questions in his piece of work, it's because it's evidence that he's trying to show a possible answer that could be coming across here. So it is not going to be just straightforward. I did mention question 11 or 12. Please use that to look at the summary way of answering questions. Right. So if you're looking at question 11 or 12, before I did mention to you to the specific paragraph in text A, summarize the main idea, the theme, or the concept in the paragraph that we're asking you to look at in text A in relation to the gist of text B, as I've said to you, which deals with the overall main idea of text B. Right. Then look for a link, similarity between the 2 texts, because in most cases that we have looked over the last 5 years, you will see that there is a link between the selected paragraph in text A and the visual of text B. Now remember, we want to test the how part. Okay, to what extent are they similar in content in terms of text A and text B? Link the 2, please. Okay, right. So the approach for your comprehension: skim through the passage quickly, provides you with an opportunity to get an overall understanding. The title I've been mentioned to you is obviously giving you the clue of the contents. Look at the introduction. Remember, it's going to create a certain setting of atmosphere while you are reading the piece of work. Read the first paragraph very carefully. It hints about what this text is all about. This paragraph usually will give you information about that. Look for the major themes that have been introduced in the paragraph 1 and 2 that will be developed obviously as we read the text further. Again, look at the last paragraph carefully. Remember, it's a summation of what the text is all about. The author is ending his text, so he will include relevant information that links to the introduction and the content of the text. Also, remember to focus on the literal and the figurative meaning of words. Please, you cannot just focus on the literal side of things. You've got to take it to the next level and look at the figurative aspects of the language, okay? So, for example, you would just say, I read Life of Pi and it touched my soul. In other words, can something touch your soul? No, it doesn't literally mean that the story got up and touched your soul. But figuratively, it would be that it had an emotional impact on you. In other words, it made you feel either maybe a warmth or affection for Pi, or it made you maybe possibly feel sad or feel distraught about the struggles that Pi went through, for example. Okay, these are things that you need to start looking at, taking it from the literal to the figurative meaning. The second part of the comprehension, which is text B, usually it's the visual text as I mentioned to you. You can get a cartoon, you can get an advert, for example, or even a poster. They could be text and they could be no text, just imagery. That's images shown to you. So you got to be able to analyze it in totality. Look for the details. What is the content of the picture, for example? If there's people in the picture, what are they doing? Is there a setting particularly that might come out in this particular image that you can look at? So look for all of the clues in the picture. Right. Then you need to figure out the message as I mentioned to you, and then I've given you a little bit of a summary here in terms of question B, how to answer those questions, and the linking of text A and B. So, you as the candidate with regards to the comprehension, please do not repeat the question in your answer because that does not show any understanding of what the examiner is asking you to look at. Make use of full sentences. In other words, make sure there is a verb for that sentence to make sentence, okay? Make sense. Also respond with only the information that's asked for you. Remember, if you're going to go on and on about a response that you want to give us and the mark allocation is 2 and you start writing for 10, 15 lines, I mean, you've lost time but in that setup, but more importantly, have you put the important information at the beginning of the 5 lines or the last 6 or 7 lines? That is what you need to look at. And can we get the idea of what you want to say? So only limited to the information that is asked of you. Use the mark allocation as a guide as I mentioned to you. Use your own words as far as possible, but if you're struggling with the language, do the clever lifting if need be. When you are asked for your viewpoint, please ensure that the substantiation is given for your viewpoint that is aligned to the content of the text. So your viewpoint may be totally valid, right? And you can put it down there, but you must also try and link it to the content that is being spoken about in text A or text B. Right. So, how do you tackle the comprehension? Firstly, you skim through the passage quickly. You read the passage until you can then find words to link to the content. Step 3, encourage yourself to ask leading questions. Okay, it does say learners here, but remember yourself is the person here now. So have yourself, when you're sitting there, ask questions to yourself of what is the author saying here? Why is he saying this? Where has his information come from, for example? Can I maybe formulate a viewpoint on what he's saying? And how did I get to that viewpoint? What did he say in that text that made me get to that viewpoint? All right. And having read what he's saying, how is it going to affect me going forward? So those are the leading questions you can sort of ask yourself. Okay. Read again the passage and the questions, this time focusing intently on the questions and what is asking of you. Read the text again, and then you answer the questions, and finally you check that your answers make sense and that they have been numbered correctly according to the questions in the question paper. Remember, grade 12s as well, if you have 1.1 and your answer is for 1.3, you cannot expect the marker to now figure that out and say, okay, I'll mark this answer correct. If you say this is the answer for 1.1, then it must be the answer for 1.1. Okay, so please take the time and make sure you do that. Right, so when you're looking at the question words or the question verbs, for example, look at analyze. We'll talk about looking at the main ideas and give us the importance of those main ideas. When we asking you to comment, we're saying discuss it, break it down into simpler information. Give us detail as to why that particular content is relevant or not relevant. When I say compare something, I mean show me the similarities between the two things. Okay, if I'm saying contrasting, obviously there will be the differences that you're going to be looking at. Define, okay, that is where we want to see, can you accurately say what is and what is not. Describing, again, giving us a little bit more detail. Are you able to synthesize? Can you integrate the information that you've read in the text and draw a conclusion based on what you have read? So those are the kind of question words that you might see in the paper coming through on Monday, but obviously they have been in the previous papers, okay? Words also like explain would be there, like interpret something, clarify why this is the case, okay? Give us reasons as to why this is the case, right? Other words like illustrate or interpret or relate doesn't really feature, but it's good to have an idea of what they mean in case they do appear, okay? I'm just saying, we don't know what's in the paper, so let's just work with everything. So if we see things like state, for example, terms like state or outline, we're saying give us the main points and arrange them in correct order, for example. Okay, that would be outline, and that would usually be a very much simple level 1 question, which I did say to you doesn't really come out so simplistically in home language. So it will be probably embedded in what we're asking you. Okay, so look at that. Good. So let's look at the NSC paper for 2021 that dealt with the old have made a mess of the world, the young will save us. Already grade 12s, I've put a circle around that. Now, just by reading the title, you should be thinking, okay, this writer is saying that the adults, the old people, have really messed up the world. So your question to yourself should be, how did they mess up the world? What did they do wrong? Where did they do it wrong, perhaps? Okay, where did they go wrong in the process of using the resources in the world? Those are the ideas that you should have. And then it says, the young will save us. In other words, this is then pointing us to the direction that the youth, people who are coming out of schools or coming out of institutions, those are the ones that will be able to save the older generation from the mistakes or from the wrongs that happened in the past. So these are ideas that you can already get just by looking at the heading or the topic of the text. So when you get your text, do that. Put a circle around the topic and then try and formulate ideas around it. Then when you read the text, let's look at the first paragraph. World leaders are now meeting in Spain to decide whether or not to bother with preventing the destruction of the earth. Like people in a vehicle speeding toward a cliff, deciding whether to brake or swerve, or maybe they are simply chatting about other things. So if you can now already start imagining someone driving a vehicle with a group of people in the car and they have no idea about, whether they're going to speed off the cliff and cause an accident with themselves, or they're going to stop and take note of things, or even think about speeding. it means that there's a hurried action taking place, okay? People, obviously when you're driving in a vehicle and people are driving fast, you can see that they're not really taking the time to follow the rules of the road. They just want to get to place B or C that they want to get to. So what this author is hinting towards, obviously by this point, is that people seem uninterested about what's going on, and they all just veering ahead without really thinking about either braking or trying to make sense of things. All right. And then you carry on reading the text like that. If you go then towards, let's say, paragraph 5, I'm going to skip a few paragraphs. It says, we are on the brink. Look at that one line there. We are on the brink. Now you ask yourself the question, why did the author write that particular statement? We are on the brink. Brink of what? Why the word brink? It means we are right there at the point. Either it means it can go a positive way or a negative way. Okay, those are the ideas you should start thinking about. In order to retreat from that brink, humankind's adolescence must end. So, again, it's saying for us to retreat, meaning come back from that brink, it's saying from that point, humankind's adolescence must end. Now, when you're looking at the word adolescence, okay, this is the use of diction, you're thinking to yourself, adolescence, what happens when you're in the phase of adolescence? Are you thinking clearly all the time? Do you make mature decisions? Are adolescents known to be mature thinkers? Have they made silly mistakes and regretted what they've done in the future? What age do you classify as an adolescent? That kind of idea should come through, all right? And obviously, here this author is hinting to the fact that the adolescence age has not been a good one. There's been mistakes being made. There's been issues that have, negatively affected humankind, and then that must end. So, in other words, going forward, for us to be successful in saving the world, we need to remove that adolescence behavior. Think about things seriously, ponder about concepts, make the right choices. That's the kind of ideas you should be thinking about as a grade 12 learner when you see that line. Okay, or the word adolescence, for example, being used. Right, further on to that, we say, as a species, we must act with restraint. Okay, again, the word restraint, obviously, we must act with. When you restrain something, we hold back a few things. We don't go head first and decide to then make sure we see it through. So think about it. In the face of consequences, we must consider other species, humans not yet born, and those currently facing dire climate vulnerability around the world from floods, fires, sea level rise, crop failure, superstorms, and more. So it's saying for us to now come back, we need to restrain ourselves. Take note of what we have. Make sure we don't abuse those resources because the consequences of that will be dire for the generations to come. So we need to consider others that are going to come, other children that are going to be born, or other species that are going to be born, okay, of animals, for example. Um, and also in terms of vulnerability, we knowing with the climate change, it gets so hot, people sometimes cannot even imagine how to deal with the heat. Air cons sometimes don't even work in this weather that's so hot. So those kind of ideas should come through when you are reading it. Okay, then it goes on obviously till the end of paragraph 9 there, where the conclusion comes in. And as I did say to you, focus on the conclusion. Look at there have been far-sighted, altruistic people in every generation. That altruistic, look at the number 3 there, it means it's a glossary attached, and that is where the word's meaning is given to you, just in terms of maybe it's a difficult word for a grade 12 learner to understand. Then it's saying helping others without self-gain. So they have been far-sighted people who are helping others without self-gain in every generation. But there are signs of a wider evolution of imagination that is taking place among the young. So, in other words, the youngsters are thinking even more in a broader sense than the older people are thinking right now. We see that profound change in the youth's new ways of dealing with conflict, rejecting competition and capitalism. So, while they understand what is possible and ethical. So there's a huge change in the way in which youngsters are dealing with conflict situations as opposed to the older generation. So whereas the older generation might have been stuck in their ideas, you sort of like dig your heels into the ground and say, this is my viewpoint and I'm not going to budge. And it's because of all of the years of these things that happened to me that I hold this viewpoint. So that's what the older generation could have possibly been doing. But this writer is saying is that now with the youngsters, he's seeing a profound change. The way they deal with conflict, they maybe talk about it or negotiate about the issues that are happening. They're rejecting competition. They're rejecting the idea of capitalism. In other words, everybody should be able to enjoy the resources. And they understand about the possible ethicalness about this. Okay, juvenility and maturity are no longer categories attached to how long you've been on earth, but how far you see and how much you care. So it's no longer about how young you are, it's about how you interpret the things that are happening in your world around you. So you can be a mature young person who would deal with a situation differently from an older person who might have a younger way of looking at the situation, a more modernized view, and it may not always work. So it's saying it doesn't matter how young you are, you can still make a profound change in society. You can bring new, innovative ideas that might challenge the trends, for example. And these are the things that the writer is talking about in this final paragraph. All right, so that's just looking at the final paragraph and the first two paragraphs or so of the text, and already we can get an idea about it. Now, obviously, if you're going to do what I'm doing here, it should help you, and you're going to then thoroughly read each paragraph and highlight or underline the main idea of each of them. Right. Then here's text B, which appeared, and again the famous Zapiro. You must know who Zapiro is by now. If you don't, please do some research before you write the paper, and then also find out that they could there could be other cartoonists that can be used as well, or cartoons that can be used. Okay. So this Zapiro as the cartoonist is challenging also the idea here of uh, adolescence and what the older people have done, all the mistakes that have happened, how they have destroyed the situations thus far. So here's a little girl who has a hashtag action, hashtag how, and dare you exclamation mark. All right. And there's an issue here that's being dealt with, global establishment. In other words, if you're thinking about an establishment, it's obviously a big building or a big organization that's dealing with certain things that this particular um, topic or text is looking at. And by throwing an object against this particular global establishment, it's almost dropping or falling backwards. So the young is able to almost um, bring down aspects that were standing up for a long time, that were not necessarily correct in the life thus far. So they can challenge it and bring new ideas and knock some sense into the giant establishments as well thus far. All right. So those are the ideas you can think about. Okay. So let's look at the questions that you possibly could have faced you in this. For example, what message does the writer convey in the first sentence? World leaders are about other things. Notice 2 marks there, the mark allocation. We want you to deal with one idea in detail. This is a comprehension type question, meaning you are required to recall information on the writer's viewpoint of the first sentence. The answer given in the marking guideline was the following. The writer's message is that world leaders are meeting to discuss climate threats but are not showing any sense of urgency in dealing with the matter. So you can already notice that although I mentioned all the other concepts in the text, the idea about this was the climate and how it's changing and how it's being changed by what the older people have done so far in life. So global warming as concept should be coming to mind here. So they are meeting to discuss these problems, but they're not showing any urgency as to how to change it. And there's your 2 marks for what this idea is about. They're meeting for for a problem, yes, but the problem is not the only thing that they are worried about. They're showing no urgency about it. Okay, then paragraph 2, discuss the importance of mentioning the participants in various protests. Okay, note here we are saying this is a commentary based question, and this is now talking about your experience in relation to the text. Why would the author be talking about the various protests? Okay, so here the answer that came through was the common factor among all participants is that they are either young or have young children, implying that the preservation of the earth is crucial for the future generations. Now, I hinted about those concepts in the final paragraph. So, if you looked at paragraph 2 and you'll go back and look at it, you will see that paragraph 2 talks about these issues, and then in the last paragraph, the author summarizes it by including that idea of paragraph 2 in his final paragraph. So he is saying that the youngsters or people who are young or have children, they are the ones that he's talking here. That's the important factor. They are important to the preservation of earth for the future generations. Young people are committed to making a change toward preserving the earth for the future generations. So the youngsters are standing up against the older generation to bring about positive change to society. And there's the 2 marks that is given for the answers there. Right. 1.5 asks the following question. How does the writer use, there's a question on diction in paragraph 5 to convey his message. It's a technical type question, and therefore you should answer the question using the keywords from the question itself. So if you provided a technical answer, you would be guaranteed 1 mark, yes. But the second mark is then secured by where you expanding and linking your comment to that first part. So the answer was given. The urgency of recognizing the peril is foregrounded by emotively charged words like on the brink or act with restraint that I took you through there in addressing the vulnerability of the climate. So he's saying it's all done and intended to convey his feelings about the harsh reality of climate change so that the reader acts responsibly, for example. Okay, so you are talking about, for 3 marks, the use of the words on the brink or acting with restraint. You are explaining what those mean, those concepts, and then your comment is saying that these are emotively charged, or he's trying to get us to understand that if we want to come back from this position, we have to restrain ourselves, we have to be able to deal with the concepts, and he's then talking about our vulnerability. We need to become a little bit more grounded to move away from issues that we are doing right now, or situations we are part of that is interfering with the climate. All right, so that kind of things we are looking for in that question. Okay, 3 marks for 2 examples of diction must come through. Well discussed. So there's the one of diction and the second one of diction, 2 marks, and then the comment that I mentioned to you there will be the third marks. Okay, right. 1.6 asked about the writer's tone in paragraph 6. So you'll go back to paragraph 6 and you look at it in relation to the text. Okay. Again, look at the fact that when we use the word comment, you need to look at Have you considered both the pros and the cons of this particular paragraph that's mentioned? And have you given a fair, unbiased, or value-based judgment? So critically offer that comment, please, with an evaluation of the issue that we are talking about. So when we talk about comment, we're saying, have you looked at both the positives and the negatives? And have you then given us an unbiased viewpoint on the concepts we are talking about or asking you to look at? So the answer given there was the writer gives instructions in prescriptive, commanding, persistent, motivational tones. For example, when he says, we must expand our imaginations, and those who come all the way to cannot just annihilate. So that's the line reference in that we're looking at that paragraph. It says the writer urges the reader to take action by repeating, we must. Okay? The writer is impressing upon the reader the need for a change in mindset toward climate change. So if we go back, it says look at paragraph 6 with close reference to the text, and the question is saying, that is the question there, comment on the tone. So he is saying to us in a very prescriptive, a commanding tone. He's saying to us, please, guys, we must start to expand our imaginations. We must try to make things better for the future generations to come. Because if we don't change our mindset, we are never going to have success. We will not be able to have a positive view on climate change going forward. So 1 mark for the tone that is being identified, and 2 marks for a comment that is me used there. Sorry, made reference to in terms of the lines. A paragraph. Right, 1.8 asked us, refer to lines 62 to 63. Juvenility and maturity, that one I spoke about to you in the last part there. In your opinion, is this final sentence an effective conclusion to the writer's argument? Justify your response. Notice grade 12s. In your opinion. Again, substantiate the viewpoint that you're going to make from what you read in the conclusion. Is he making sense? Okay, in his conclusion. It's a technical question, a technical aspect that's tested here. The use of a quote makes it personal and therefore emotional. This would then give you 1 mark, for example. When you're offering your viewpoint, again, look at the exploitation of the artifacts. And then there you'd get your 2nd and 3rd marks. Right, so the answer. The final sentence leaves no room for debates. It is a resounding confidence that the ability of the youth is to revolutionize, change the way of doing things in order to save the planet. And that's what he's saying in the final paragraph. He says, for anything to happen, the youth are the ones that will make the positive change. It is effective as the sentence sums up the argument that maturity is not synonymous with age, but with wisdom and responsibility. So he's saying the youngsters have been responsible. They have the wisdom to change what has happened thus far and therefore will bring good change for us. All right. Good. 1.9 then talks about that girl. Remember the one that where she has the hashtags and she's throwing it at the global organization? The question says, why has Greta arrived with a hashtag, 2 hashtag speech bubble in her hand? Again, here we want you to give details for showing your understanding. The answer is, the 2 hashtag slogans are Greta's weapons. 2 marks just for stating that. Online tools against the establishment. They represent defiance. In other words, hashtag action. Take action against something. It's a call of action towards annihilating or removing something. All right, defiance coming through there. The resistance movement slogans are depicted as physical weapons or online tools. So her hashtag, having those hashtag statements or phrases, those are now there to say, please, we need to take action against the global establishment, and that's her weapons that she is using. So just for stating that, grade 12s, and highlighting the hashtag, identifying the hashtag, the one slogan and the second slogan, and saying it is the weapons of Greta's would give you the 2 marks there. Right. 1.11, this is the one of the summary question. To what extent does text B reinforce the ideas expressed in paragraph 7 of text A? Notice we're talking about the whole of text B in relation to paragraph 7. Mark allocation, 4 marks there. Motivate your response. Remember, we are linking the two texts. So we state this link in your response and you then earn the 1 mark. Also take note, if the question refers to the whole of text A and a particular paragraph, you would have to obviously then look at that. Okay. Expand on your response by explaining how it addresses the issue in each text. And then for the remaining marks, decide on the two texts and present a subjective view on that regarding the issue. And then obviously offer your substantiation with reasons. So the answer given here was paragraph 7, notice, of text A focuses on the leading role of young people and the ones that they are playing in saving the planet. Text B fully supports the message in paragraph 7 of text A. And there you got your idea of linking paragraph 7 of text A to text B. In text B, Greta challenges the status quo and is undaunted by the power of the global corporates who are compromising the environment. Her environmental maturity and leadership are evident. Her action in text B emanates from her understanding the gravity and the gravity and the scale of the catastrophe. So she is a youngster taking action against the wrongs that was done by the global establishment. And therefore, she's trying to rectify it because she realizes what a catastrophe is taking place. The businessman in text B, or the politician, represents those who have wielded corporate power on boards, cast votes, and own shares, referenced in paragraph 7. Despite their unlimited powers, they cannot withstand the young activists who may be less visible but are no less committed. So they might be young and they might not look so significant, but they can nevertheless make changes when it comes to these global establishments, when they're going to their protest action, when they are doing hashtag events, or they are showcasing situations where changes can come through. And that's all shown in the text, okay? 4 marks for talking about both the texts. All right, and that's the comprehension. Now, quickly looking at the summary, grade 12. Remember, the summary is the concept of taking a huge text and putting it into a shortened piece of work. We're looking at the gist, the key ideas, and the main points of the text that is worth remembering. So, like the comprehension, read the original text and get a feeling of what it's all about. Read the text again. At this time, highlight the important information like you did in the comprehension. Be accurate, clear, and straightforward. Remember, you have a limited amount of words to get your idea across. So work with that. Use your own words as far as possible. Careful not just to not just to use phrases of the text, because it doesn't always just make sense to put the phrases there. You got to show it in terms of linking the idea from one idea to the next idea. Make use of full sentences and please leave out examples. Don't give us lengthy descriptions and avoid the direct speech in terms of the summary. All right. So how do we do it? We obviously are stripping away the extra words and the examples. we are then also focusing on the heart or the gist of the issue that he's talking about or mentioned about. We are focusing or we're trying to find the key words and phrases that still manage to get the idea of what the text is across to us as the reader. All right. Then we are then also trying to capture the main ideas of the text and the crucial details that are necessary to supporting those things. Okay. So what should you as the learner do? You need to pull out the main ideas. In other words, outline each paragraph in the margin, right? You're also going to focus on the key details. You're going to use your key words and phrases. You're going to break down the larger ideas. In other words, remember you're highlighting the main idea of each paragraph, okay? And looking at the last sentence or the concluding sentence. Write only enough to convey the gist of the text. Don't write more than that, please. Write succinct but complete sentences for the summary. Right. So, firstly, focus on the topic. Read all the instructions given to you. Identify the important aspects that the topic is talking about. Okay, because the topic is the hint of what the text is all about. So look for the important aspects. Write the topic in large bold letters at the top of your planning page when you're constructing your summary. Again, read the topic again and try and then remain focused in terms of producing a summary. Right. Remember to identify the main point in each paragraph. Always make sure that the point that you're mentioning is relevant to the question that is being asked of you. Please always try and write in your own words as far as possible. If you cannot, you will try and do the clever lifting. Remove the extra words and the examples given there, and please be accurate, clear, and straightforward with your response. Don't go around the bush. You don't have the number of words to do that. And focus on the core of the matter that we are dealing with in the summary. Try to find your keywords in each paragraph, your key phrases, and those ones will obviously still capture the main idea of what the writer is trying to talk about. Right. Then, in terms of the further on to this, please capture the main idea as far as possible and then try and get points that support them. Avoid writing in the first person, please. That's not going to sound very intelligent to the marker. Rather use the third person when you are doing the summary. So when we mark the summary grade 12s, we are looking for 7 points that are relevant to the topic. So when you read the statement that's given and then it says to you, okay, you in a paragraph of 80 to 90 words, summarize da 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 da. So we're looking for 7 points, 7 ideas. Let's say 7 ideas here in the paragraph that you are going to construct of 90 words. So your 7 ideas will give it 1 mark each, 7 marks for that. Okay, 1 point, 1 mark for each of the ideas. And then 3 marks are given for language, giving you a total of 10. Now, the language mark becomes a little bit more important in the sense that if you are not quoting, in other words, you have used your own words, okay, and the points are relevant or the ideas are relevant. Say if there's 1 to 3 ideas relevant, you will get 1 mark. So in other words, the 3 plus the 1. If there are 4 to 5 ideas which are correct in your own words that you've put across, you will get 2 marks for language. So let's say 5 plus 2 will then be 7. If you then have 6 to 7 ideas which are relevant to the question, you are then awarded the 3 marks for the language. So that's how you would get your 6 out of 10 or your 7 out of 10 or your 10 out of 10 if you have not quoted verbatim. Right. Now, if you have quoted verbatim, and that means grade 12s, capital letter for capital letter, comma for comma, question mark for question mark, colon for colon, whatever it is, exactly the same is happening in the text as your answer sheet shows. Then we're saying to you, if you had 6 to 7 ideas which were quoted and are correct in there, in other words, they are related to the question, you will get no language mark. So you will still get 7 out of 10. Look at that. Think about it, digest it, and understand that you can still get 7 out of 10 if you lifting word for word. If you had 4 to 5 quotes, for example, and they are all relevant to what the question is asking for, you will be given 1 mark. Okay, and that's how you would get your 4 plus 1 or your 5 plus 1 for the summary. If you had 2 to 3 quotes and they were relevant to the question, you would then be given a maximum of 2 language marks. Okay, so that is how you break up the language mark out of 3 when you quoting and not quoting. Okay, so note, if you're quoting 7 direct quotes, you're still scoring 7 out of 10. So delete descriptions, examples, explanations, elaborations, replace them with, or replace jargon with your own words if possible. Remember to keep the main idea of what the text is talking about, list the key concepts that are identified in the text, and write down your 7 points. Please remember that it's not necessary in the examination to rephrase the entire passage in your own words, which often leads to misinterpretation. All you need to do is make slight alterations. For example, if you're struggling with the summary to the passage, and you will still score a minimum of 7 out of 10. So you can obtain more marks if you substitute just a single word with a synonym. Now remember, the synonym is a word which has the similar meaning to the word you are replacing or substituting. Remove a word from the original sentence, or you can add a word as well. All right, that is how you can get another mark there. Just changing a punctuation, as long as it doesn't alter the meaning of the sentence, would also give you a mark. Look at the fact that the tense as well, if you're changing the tense, you could obviously score a mark or 2 there. And if you're changing the order of the words in the sentence and it still makes sense, you'll get a mark. So these are the cheats that I can say to you to ensure you're getting at least that 7 out of 10 for the summary. So go back and revise. Okay. Good. Then in terms of your textual editing of question 5, grade 12s. Remember that this is where we are testing your understanding of language concepts in relation to a text. So all your life you have learnt about pronouns, conjunctions, adjectives, parts of speech. In terms of all of those ones, you've learnt about also proper nouns, collective nouns. You've learnt about figures of speech. You've learnt about concord errors. All of these things are now tested in relation to a text given. So you'll be given a text with deliberate errors. You need to find the errors and correct them. So the parts of speech would obviously be looking at the identifying of that particular part of speech and then converting them from one to another. If you're looking at concord, remember plural subject, plural verb. They must agree with each other. Singular subject, singular verb. There must be an agreement with each other in the sentence. Reported speech and tenses, remember, if it is reported or indirect speech, everything is in the past tense. We don't usually test the direct speech that for a question, because we usually give you the direct and we say put it into the reported or the indirect. Right. So look at ambiguity. Okay, that double meaning that might come across. Malapropism, tautology or redundancy. Okay. Um, Remember, these are concepts that you would have heard about over the years. Go back and look at the last 3 to 5 years of the papers and work with them, okay? There are also guidelines given to you. I hope your teachers have done revision at school level where they went through the text with you and gave you the answers so you can also then look at why it was a redundancy answer, for example. All right, looking at the active and the passive voice, also concept you dealt with over the years. The purpose or the function of the punctuation marks. Remember things like the colon, the hyphen, the exclamation mark. Why do we use those certain exclamation marks? Okay, oh sorry, punctuation marks. Phrases and clauses. What's the difference between the two? Remember, one word needs something to make sense. The other one can stand alone and still make sense. Sentence structure, looking at your simple, compound, complex sentences, moving towards the statements and quotations, those kind of things you can look at. And here's a summary for you from 2018 to 2023, all of the concepts we have dealt with in question 5 over the years. So you will go through this grade 12 at some point, hopefully, and you will look at, okay, where are the patterns coming across, the concepts that seem to feature in the paper. And if you cover all of these that have been covered in the last 5 years, you are guaranteed to at least get 5 or 6 out of 10 just by mastering these concepts and how to deal with them in a given text. Okay, so go back and revise, please. Right, so grade 12s, we have come to the end of the lesson, and hopefully you have taken note of what I've said to you over this lesson and the previous lessons in terms of paper 1. This is the one that is 17 marks. It does carry another huge weight for the English home language. It's dealing with the language that makes it the home language as opposed to the first additional language or the second additional language. The concepts you deal with in home language are tested to see that you can use those concepts in the real world. When you are formulating agendas and minutes of meeting, for example, in the real world, when you are doing reports for your bosses, when you are interacting with your managers, if you're going to work, or your lecturers, or whoever it is you're going to interact with in the real world after this, can you use concepts of home language to communicate? It doesn't help us trying to hold a conversation and we use a word and we have no idea what that word means. Okay, it then shows us to be quite, I'm not going to say stupid, but it will show us to look like we really don't know what we're talking about. Okay, and you don't want that. So you use a word because it's appropriate and it means what you want it to say. So build your vocabulary before you go into paper 1. Try and keep up with the current trends, as I said to you, and make sure you are ready for this paper come Monday the 28th. I want to wish you all the best, grade 12s, for the paper in advance. Make sure you prep yourself nicely, you rest as well as far as possible. You've had a few days, some of us, to relax and prep ourselves nicely for the paper. So hopefully you have done justice and revised everything you need to. All the best for the remaining paper 1 and then paper 2 coming through also in the next couple of weeks. And I want to thank you for joining me for these lessons, and I hope to see you next time when we're looking at the other papers or the other paper, sorry, and other lessons going forward. Thank you, grade 12s, and all the best thus far.